During the last live stream, one of you requested this video, and I'm so glad that you did, because I'm very happy with how it turned out. I think it's fascinating. Not only, we always have fun ranking stuff, but to see the big picture of the X-Men franchise over the years, I think is pretty special. As it moves to the MCU. So again, thank you, and I hope you're as happy with the resulting video as I am. All right, so Kevin Feige had to turn Marvel's B team, and that's generous, into the A team for Marvel Studios because Spider-Man, the X-Men, and many other better, more well-known characters had already been licensed to other studios when Marvel had been faced with bankruptcy. And some of those projects made major waves, laying the foundation for what would become Feige's empire. In fact, Feige, with his comic book knowledge, got his start with the original X-Men films, sneaking a young Hugh Jackman comic books to make sure Jackman got the character just right. You know how the studios are, make your own choices. But although Feige today is like, hey, you don't need to read Secret Invasion. What happened? But back in the day, he knew that Hugh Jackman had to see the source material. So as the X-Men and Feige are reunited in the MCU, let's rank all the many X-Men projects that have gotten us here. This isn't every single one, but it's all the major ones. I've got 20 movies and shows. So settle in, get a snack. It's been a long and very bumpy road. And as always, I'm excited to hear your own thoughts down below. You don't have to rank all 20 of them. You can come up with the top 5 or top 10. All right, but here I go. Number 20, The Gifted. Ew, remember this? Let's pretend it never existed. This TV drama from Bryan Singer and Lauren Shuler Donner, I can't believe it's from the X-Men movie producers, was a huge embarrassment. I think I watched like maybe 3/4 or at least the first episode, and I was like, I'm out. Shows like this were probably why Feige infamously wanted nothing to do with Jeff Loeb, then head of Marvel Television. To be fair, I want to be fair to Loeb's legacy. He's written some of the most incredible comic books, particularly DC. But outside of the Netflix shows and maybe Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for some of you, although it was so networky, although that's not Jeff Loeb's fault. But a lot of the shows that came out of Marvel Television under his tenure were not good. Although he has plenty of company, as you'll see from the bottom of this list. Number 19, X-Men Dark Phoenix. It ain't easy to adapt this stuff, man. It's not easy to do anything in Hollywood because there's a lot of crap there. All right, but there's a lot of good, which is why this list is fascinating. All right, number 19, again, as I said, X-Men Dark Phoenix. The X-Men have had some fantastic movies, but they've also had some truly awful ones, which we're going to go through now. Simon Kinberg, who'd long been a writer and producer on the X-Men franchise, thought that he could take it over after Bryan Singer's horrible scandal made Singer unhireable. But wow, did Kinberg fail spectacularly. Whew! Somehow he still manages to get work. Now, like some other infamous films, this one allowed an actor to get themselves killed off because they didn't want to play the role anymore. In this case, it was Jennifer Lawrence, who had never liked being Mystique, even though it had done so much for her career, but then also ended up hurting it because she'd done a lot of damage to the character by not wanting to play the character. She should have just, I guess she couldn't get out of the contract or she didn't want to turn down the money, but it was a mistake on everyone's part. Sophie Turner, though, from Game of Thrones, was pretty good Jean Grey. But did we really need to see the Dark Phoenix saga yet again? Particularly when they did a poor job again. You're like, why are you making me watch this again? Especially when it's not even good still. This was the last main Fox X-Men movie. With good reason! They're like, whew, what a stinker. And as you can see, they made plenty of stinkers. This was so bad, this was the one that finally was a step too far. Number 18, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Another clunker. Hugh Jackman loves this character and comes from a good place, but this was his first effort at producing a standalone movie, and it was not good. He eventually made up for it, but this was a bad start. Still, the movie is famous for 2 reasons. 1, Hugh Jackman streaking across the screen. I still to this day remember my audience's reaction. And then also, of course, 2, casting Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Sure, this version was a Hollywood cluster, but it secured the role for Reynolds, who had been a dream fan casting and set important wheels in motion that today have led to not only Jackman, but Reynolds leading the charge for this franchise's future. So this was an important film, even though it was awful. All right, number 17, X-Men Apocalypse. The poster makes this look like it's also just pure torture, but this movie was actually watchable and had some moments. At this time, this was the second full-on movie focusing on the first-class version of the X-Men. There had been X-Men Days of Future Past in between, but this was where they got their own movie once again. And it gave fans at the time some hope for the franchise. They didn't know where it was going to end up. It had some cool sequences, some very cool use of powers, and at the very end, it did give the team their classic comic book suits, which look laughably bad now that we see what the MCU can do with Wolverines. But at the time, we were so starved that we were just like, wee, yeah, how exciting. I don't care if it's spandex and Lycra, let's go. Plus Psylocke, a huge fan favorite, finally made her live action debut. And we got to see Hugh Jackman as Weapon X. That was cool. Not to mention a nice little end credits tease with Mr. Sinister. As I said, it at least left fans hopeful. Too bad that absolutely none of these things were delivered on with the follow-up movie, Dark Phoenix, a huge shift in the wrong direction, straight down into the ground. All right, then, 16, The New Mutants. How is this higher than X-Men Apocalypse? One reason and one reason only. Anya Taylor-Joy's magic. Magical casting. Perfect casting. And one of the top fan requests for characters to make the jump from Fox to the MCU. I don't think it's going to happen, but Anya Taylor-Joy did a fantastic, phenomenal job as Magic. Number 15, X-Men: The Last Stand. The worst of the first trilogy, but ironically, the most successful box office-wise. Probably because it was riding the coattails of the insanely popular and good X2, but it was also the first time they did the Dark Phoenix story in live action. Oh, who knew that would become a broken record? But infamously, on that note, they really dropped the ball. So bad. So bad. Again, some Hollywood screenwriter was like, what if we did this? And you're like, just read the frickin' comic, man. They did all the work for you. All right, so anyway, they did give us some hot scenes between Logan and Jean, though, which I do think helped the movie. However, overall, this movie and X-Men Origins Wolverine ended up being such a disappointment for fans that Fox decided to reboot the franchise, recasting everyone but Wolverine. They went off in their own movie. Wolverine had a cameo, and then also Wolverine went off to try again with another solo movie, which we'll be getting to in just a moment. But first, number 14, Wolverine and the X-Men. To sustain fans during this break, Marvel themselves put out a new animated series, Wolverine and the X-Men, airing on Nicktoons, produced partially by Kevin Feige. Fans, though, were not happy to see Wolverine yet again front and center, even in the title. Where was Chuck? Well, he and Jean Grey had mysteriously disappeared. So did this show, only lasting one season. But at least it also featured Emma Frost, who was becoming very popular at the time in the comics, and who has still yet to really make the jump to animation or live action in a meaningful way. In fact, it's taken so long to get to Emma Frost that the character, sadly, isn't even popular anymore in the comics, because apparently, Fabulous Queen Bitch is hard to write, particularly for comic book writers. How is that possible? I mean, you don't got someone who can do some fabulousness there? I miss Emma Frost in her heyday. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Now she's wearing a brown wig, married to Tony Stark. What the heck? What the heck, man? What the heck? I guess she did start the Hellfire Gala. But come on. She's not Anna Wintour. She's Real Housewives. All right, number 13, The Wolverine. Speaking of giving fans hope, while this movie also wasn't great, at least Fox and Hugh Jackman were beginning to course correct to a more serious and comics accurate version of the character. Yes, while the X-Men rebooted, Wolverine went to Japan, delighting fans, because the character, of course, has a rich history with Japan in the comics. The movie was not great, though. It was better than X-Men Origins Wolverine. But I think most importantly, the movie paired Hugh Jackman with director James Mangold. I can't believe James Mangold directed this. But anyway, they would later go on, of course, to bring the world Logan. Aww. Number 12, Legion. For the first 2 seasons, this show was actually really good. And before the streaming wars, was one of the first franchise shows to get it right and excite fans. Oh, this stuff can be sophisticated. aside from animation and network television. Noah Hawley, who had done Fargo and is still doing Fargo to this day, but this continued to give Hawley a name for himself. And the show featured some fantastic performances from its up-and-coming and/or underappreciated cast. Dan Stevens, Aubrey Plaza, Gene Smart, Hamish Linklater, Amber Midthunder. Many of them went on to amazing projects, some of them in the comic book space, and some upcoming. But whatever happened to Rachel Keller? I think Margot Robbie drank her milkshake, but she was great. Number 11, X-Men Evolution. It's not the original animated series, but X-Men Evolution helped keep fans happy, coming out in 2000 to capitalize on the first movie and running for 4 seasons. That's pretty good. The goth take on Rogue was particularly popular. All right, now we're down to the proper top 10. Woo, we're getting to the good stuff. Number 10, X-Men First Class. In fact, before this, I had switched this with the last one, but I was like, X-Men First Class, it's got to be in the top 10. It's got to make the list. So while the box office was not great, some of you will defend this movie to the death. It delighted some fans quite a bit. This reboot got people, yes, at least some people, the box office was low, but it got some people excited for the future of the franchise again. And some of the casting, to be fair, was excellent, particularly James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Magneto. Oh, that was pretty good. Matthew Vaughn cooked on that one, although on some of the stuff, he really pooped the bed. So also, and at the time though, we'll get to the Hellfire Club in a moment. But anyway, that's where it was bad. But anyway, at the time, even though she ultimately, of course, damaged the role and had fans turn on her, Jennifer Lawrence was a huge get for this movie. She signed on to it just as her career was blowing up. I think she signed on to it right before her career blew up. I think if it had been just a few months later, she probably would have turned it down. But, at the time that she signed, she felt she needed it and really hated it. But anyway, yeah, the Hellfire Club stuff, oh my gosh, embarrassing. That's, Sebastian Shaw. That's Emma Frost. Oh, it was so bad. But the Wolverine cameo, again, as I said, was fun. Number 9, Deadpool 2. While some fans might prefer the original, I like this one a little bit better. This sequel was just as successful as the first film, which was quite successful. So this cemented that Deadpool was the second most important character in the franchise and underlined the importance of Ryan Reynolds' creative and business acumen. It was fun also to see fan favorites Cable and Domino, along with other nods to X-Force, who of course were often Deadpool's team in the comics. Some really good comics shout-outs here. The movie also made it clear that R-rated comic book movies were here to stay, a refreshing change of pace for fans and general audiences alike. Deadpool overall has been much more influential, but we'll talk about it with the first Deadpool. All right, number 8, X-Men, the one that started it all. Singer, Schuler Donner, and Fox the studio, along with clearly some guidance from a young Feige, cast the hell out of this movie. Almost all the casting is perfect, with only a few characters getting tragically shortchanged, but not necessarily an issue with the casting, with the writing and stuff like that. But Halle Berry, though, some people were not happy with Halle Berry as Storm. She wasn't a great Storm. But I think also it's important to point out, and it's fair to point out, that at the time, she was the biggest star in the movie. And the fact that she was willing to make a comic book movie was a very big deal. It was a big deal. She really did a lot of heavy lifting for the film from a business and fan perspective, mainstream audience perspective, let's say. But along with discovering Hugh Jackman, Rebecca Romijn as reimagined Mystique, pushing the boundaries of a PG-13 rating, brilliant and game-changing. All right, number 7, Logan. They say the third time's the charm. And after 2 super weak solo films, that was the case with Hugh Jackman and James Mangold with Logan. This, of course, was intended to be Hugh Jackman's send-off after 17 years of playing the character. And Jackman and Mangold reunited to give fans what they wanted, a bleak, R-rated old man Logan storyline that made us cry more than once. I cried twice for sure during this movie, like full-on Pixar-level tears. Although better than Pixar, because I felt this movie earned them. Plus, we got X-23, who herself was gaining in popularity at the time. Today, the character is even more popular and a fully fledged and accepted member of the team. A little controversial when she first showed up on the scene, but today, she's fantastic. She even has her own older counterpart from Messing with the Timeline, just like, of course, there's old man Logan. Very interesting. I actually like that stuff quite a bit. So no wonder fans were, of course, delighted to see her return for Deadpool and Wolverine. Logan is definitely one of the most highly regarded comic book movies out there and significantly helped Jackman and Mangold not only repair the damage they'd done with the bad Wolverine movies, but significantly help their careers overall in Hollywood. Number 6, X-Men, the animated series, the one on Fox back in the day. And you could argue that this, in many ways, was really the one that started it all for the X-Men in the mainstream. This animated series, airing on Fox, and that's why it's known as the Fox animated series, debuted in 1992 and ran also for 5 seasons. It adapted many of and back when you would get tons of episodes a season. Like this thing's on Disney Plus right now, and it's a lot. But they adapt some of the most famous X-Men comic book storylines and adapt them well. A huge percentage of X-Men fans today got into the X-Men because of this show. Very similar to the influence and importance of Batman the Animated Series, which, what do you know, also came out in 1992. And then just 2 years later, Spider-Man swung into the animated TV space. And it's really, these 3 shows laid a lot of the groundwork for today's super fandom when it comes to comic books. They don't get enough credit. They don't get enough credit. But Kevin Feige remembers, a lot like Pepperidge Farm does, and one of the first things he did when he got the X-Men back was to continue this show with X-Men 97, which we'll be getting to soon on this list as we reach the top 5. Number 5, though, is Deadpool, the original, back in 2016, not even 10 years ago. But this was a huge risk. So risky that the only reason it got made was because Ryan Reynolds shrewdly leaked the test footage. Who did it? He didn't know. And then that was great though. But it sparked fans to demand that Fox make the film. And also, I think, speaks to the beginning of the influence of the internet, now that I think about it, and social media, and the power the leverage that started to give fans like never before. That actually ended up sometimes being used for evil these days, but I think it's a double-edged sword, like so many things in life. Now, this was the first major studio comic book movie to be rated R, and was so successful, it would inspire other movies and franchises to follow suit, with Logan and Joker particularly successful. Neither of those movies would probably be rated R or maybe even exist if Deadpool hadn't proven that R-rated comic book movies could do really well at the box office. And then also, it literally pays to give the fans what they ask for. This was also huge for Ryan Reynolds' career, not only making him a Hollywood A-lister, but showcasing his strong business skills. He's gone on to not only become a big star, but start several business ventures, including purchasing a soccer team and making a hit reality show about it. But perhaps most impressive, he even now has his own advertising agency, which spun out of the incredible PR campaign he helped design for this first Deadpool film. Number 4, X-Men Days of Future Past. Before the current multiverse craze, we got this movie based on one of the most famous X-Men comic book stories. Now, this is a very loose adaptation, but it was still so much fun, with both the X-Men casts coming together at the same time, linked by who else? Wolverine. Bryan Singer returned to the franchise and seemed to get his mojo back, but it turned out to only be for one film. However, it was quite the ride. He sputtered out with Apocalypse, but this was just still really, really strong. And once again, some excellent casting was done here. Evan Peters debuted as Quicksilver. His sequences, beautiful. Plus, we got such intelligent, inventive work with speedsters. Plus, we got glimpses of Bishop and Blink, played by international stars Omar Sy and Fan Bingbing. This was also by far and away Jennifer Lawrence's best performance as Mystique, because it was the most like Rebecca Romijn. This movie was a huge hit, as big as the Deadpool movies would soon be, and was the last great X-Men movie until now. Number 3, Deadpool and Wolverine. The 2 most popular X-Men movie characters strike out on their own with spectacular results. Deadpool and Wolverine is the culmination of all these projects, both story-wise and business-wise. And it's a fantastic love letter to the two characters, particularly Wolverine. Ah, so beautiful. The movie is smart, fun, emotional, and action-packed, with a bunch of cameos to highlight the crazy journey these characters, we fans, and the franchise have been on. Deadpool and Wolverine also continues the ownership that Reynolds and Jackman have earned over these characters, with Feige happily handing over the creative reins to them once they'd all agreed on a storyline. It's also exciting for Reynolds, Jackman, and fans to finally have these characters in the MCU, and that energy not only fuels this film, but propels it forward. Number 2, the runner-up, X-Men 97. Wow, the X-Men sure are having a good year, at least in my opinion, with 2 and 3 on this list having just debuted and under Feige's new reign. Oh, that's exciting. X-Men 97 is even better than, some of you might be like, it's just because you recently saw them. I don't agree. I think these are the best. Well, when we'll get to one in a moment. But X-Men 97, I think, is even better than the original animated series that it continues, because instead of adapting the famous comics, it's now telling its own story, yet still lovingly honoring those original comics. Oh, it's beautiful. I wish its ratings were a little better, but, let's see what happens with season 2. X-Men 97 is bold adult storytelling, as the creators acknowledge that a lot of X-Men fans have grown up and are now living in a world where we seem to be constantly experiencing history before our eyes, and the X-Men are perhaps more relevant than ever. This show is also very sexy and acknowledges and represents the diverse fan base that the X-Men have built up over the years, and that the franchise, I think, means so much to. Plus, it's Emmy nominated. That's helpful as well. It's going up against Blue Eye Samurai. That's going to be tough. I think there's another show, Scavenger Reigns or something, that you guys are also rooting for. Maybe I should check that out. But we're talking X-Men. Plus, finally now, let's talk about it. The greatest X-Men project of all time, and I bet most of you agree with me, is still X2. Just banger after banger of action sequences. Before the Russo brothers run with the MCU movies, there was X2. Really, such good action sequences. After having gotten the hang of blockbuster filmmaking and using visual effects with the first X-Men movie, Bryan Singer put the pedal to the metal, similar to how Christopher Nolan leveled up with his sequel, The Dark Knight, although the action sequences in this film, are superior. Both incredible movies, obviously, and I think arguably game changers. But the action sequences in X2, my God, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Wolverine is, of course, once again, front and center, but Magneto also really shined here. That prison break, it was amazing! So many great fan moments. I remember still seeing this movie as a kid. I dragged my parents to it. We had to go to the 10 o'clock screening because it was sold out. And I was like, wait till you see this. I was going crazy in my seat. Jean Grey, sporting an amazing new haircut, looking fabulous, teasing the Dark Phoenix saga as her flirtation with Logan heated up. That opening with Nightcrawler, Lady freaking Deathstrike, when she was getting Wolverine, I'll always remember that. Sticking him like a pincushion. And of course, the MVP, Mystique. Rebecca Romijn can't even act, but it didn't matter. The Mystique sequences here, incredible use of the character. And like many supermodels, Rebecca Romijn really understood her physicality, and I think that was crucial to the character. My goodness. The X-Men's movie future had never seemed brighter. But then something horrible happened. So Bryan Singer, turns out, was a huge fan, not so much of comics, but of the original Superman movie. In fact, he ended up being too big of a fan because he tried so hard to mirror the 1978 film with his reboot and did it very poorly. So it just totally undercut his film. He didn't even really create anything new. He created just like this weak echo of the 1978 movie. But it was Singer who pursued Superman, getting Richard Donner's blessing for his pitch by going through X-Men producer Lauren Schuler Donner, and then using that to get on Warner Brothers' radar. The result was at least the temporary destruction of 2 franchises. In some ways, they're still both reeling from this fateful moment in Hollywood history. Whew. X2 was just so good, though. It was so good. Speaking of the multiverse, who knows what might have happened if Singer had stuck with the X-Men franchise and continued the X2 storyline. Who knows what Hollywood world we'd be living in. But I think we're finally doing pretty darn. X-Men Days of Future Past was good, and this list, and we're doing good now. That's what's important. All right, so that's my ranking of these 20 X-Men projects. What do you think were the best projects and the worst? And now that you look at it with the snapshot of the big picture, what are your thoughts as you reflect back and look forward? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.